Okay, so I wanted to give a brief overview of the mixer, just kind of as an intro tour. The important thing to understand when it comes to mixers is that, at least with the case of this one, there's 24 different channels here. If you can learn just one channel, everything else falls into place because it's all identical. It's just the same exact thing over and over again. So let's just focus from here over. These last 4 channels I'm going to pay attention to. Basically, the way it works is you have some type of cable plugged in, whether it be a microphone cable up top or whether it be something closer like an instrument cable here in what's labeled the high Z connector. And from there, the sound comes down. It gets modified as needed by the various knobs, and we'll go over those. It goes through this top volume knob that's labeled gain. That kind of does a major adjustment on the volume. Comes down. There's a mute button here that obviously affects whether or not you're going to hear it. And then you have your main volume. So let's do this. No, hold on for a second. So, assuming you have your gain up, assuming you have your mute off, well, I'll mute that, and assuming you have your volume slider up, all of that does is allow the sound to go from here on the main strip here for that specific channel over to the various speaker outputs. So here we have 2 red sliders, one for left and one for right, and then an orange slider for mix. The way we have it wired up here at church is that the L, the left, is the 3 main speakers on the left side of the sanctuary. And likewise, the R for right is the 3 main speakers on the right side. So that's the main central area of the sanctuary itself, and the 3 larger white speakers. This orange one over here labeled mix has a tag up top here that says balcony choir. As you probably can guess, those are the round ceiling speakers up in the balcony, down below the balcony, and then there's 2 black speakers up at the either side of the choir up in the chancel area. So that's kind of a master controller for that. So when you open this up and you have the mute button off and you have the slider up to midway, it's going to go through all 3 of those immediately. And assuming they're all kind of right at 0, everything should work as expected. So let me go ahead and go over the other knobs we have here. Like I mentioned, there's a mute button which is specific for this channel. All the other knobs here in this row, or I'm sorry, in this column, all affect just the cable plugged in at the connection up top here. So the blue knobs we have here are kind of pitch controls. You have a high, kind of like a treble in your car where you have a high pitch. It's a lot of the cymbals. It's a lot more of generally the female vocalists that have a nice high pitched voice to them. And so that kind of can add or reduce some of the high tension, like ringiness noises and the sometimes echoes, etc. The bottom knob here is the low, or the bass knob. That affects a lot of the low pitch bump noises, the bass and the tenor vocalists, a bass guitar, and there's a lot of other instruments that have some bass in them other than the bass guitar, but that kind of affects the lower pitches or the bass. And then the mid, in your car you generally only have treble and bass. Well, we get a little more fancy here and have a mid-range knob. For the most part, with a lot of the vocal microphones we use here, at least with the way that we have our current speakers, it's not a bad idea to have the mid just a little bit higher than everything else. Doesn't need to be. But you can make some fine-grained adjustments for the way it sounds based on that. For the most part, you don't have to do much with those knobs, though. The orange we'll get to later, but the long and the short is they allow things to go out to other special sets of speakers. So once you understand the concept of this one channel, and you take that concept and apply it to every other channel, it becomes a whole lot easier to understand what's going on with the mixer, understand what cables are going to what things and how the volume is controlled for each one. You can have numerous microphones on at once. Not always recommended, because you end up with weird things like feedback, which is like a ringing noise when the microphone can hear the speaker and the same noise is going around in loops over and over again. So let me go ahead. I'm going to put on some sample music. This is just Pandora, so it's whatever Pandora picked for me. Now what I just did, I went ahead and hit play on my cell phone over there, and I have channel 21 and channel 22 wired up to my phone. I'm going to go ahead and unmute both of them, and you still don't hear anything. It's because the slider is all the way down, obviously. I'm going to go ahead and just bring one up just a little bit. Hopefully you can hear that. So obviously I can slide it up, and as I'm sliding, it's gradually getting louder, which is a really big advantage of the sliders. It's so much easier to be working them in just small adjustments. And there's a lot of times during a service when you're making adjustments, it only needs to be small adjustments. It doesn't need to be something too big. Now notice I said I had it plugged in at 21 and 22. Sometimes with stereo things, like something that has a left and it has a designated right for the two different earpieces, you'll end up with two connectors. You won't see this much with the microphones, but you can use both. They're generally going to be fairly much the same. Some music will be different, especially if we get into split tracks. That's going to get ahead of myself. So as you can tell, slide it up, you can hear the volume getting a little louder. Now if you hit the mute button, all of a sudden, music's gone. So just as a general practice, I like to avoid just pounding on the mute button, just hammering it on and off whenever possible. If I'm done with a song or something, I'll go ahead and I'll fade it out instead of just whacking the mute button to kill it.